Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is the second presentation about the Unit 9.1 grammar, conditionals. Here we will do a review of the 0, first, second and third conditional structures. You can find information about these in your course book, page 138, 6.1 and 6.2, and page 144, activities 9.1. In this presentation we will look at how to use and recognize the difference between different conditional situations in different time frames, looking at both real and unreal conditional sentences in present, future and past times. We will also look at the difference between if and unless, some practice activities and some recommendations for further study and practice. So first of all, you've already studied the first, second and third conditional. So think about these sentences and the function of each. What are we talking about? When are we talking about it? Is it real or is it imaginary? So the first two sentences, if you study, you learn. Ice melts if you heat it. These are, of course, real situations. They're facts and they are generally true. We call it the zero conditional. If Galatasaray wins the league again, I'll be happy. He's going to be sad if she doesn't marry him. These are real situations with future results. So, these are the first conditional sentences. If I saw an alien, I'd take a photograph. I would give money to charity if I won $1 million. So these situations are imaginary, hypothetical, but they're about the present or future time. So those are the second conditionals. If I hadn't drunk so much, I wouldn't have been ill this morning. I wouldn't have cooked meat if you had told me you were a vegetarian. So those are hypothetical, imaginary conditionals, but this time about the past. So those are third conditionals. With some of these conditionals, we can start the sentence with if or when. But there is a difference, and we can only use when with the zero or first conditional sentences. Compare these sentences. In the first sentence, we do not know if shoppers will buy two or not. We're just stating a fact about the promotion. In the second sentence, we are sure that it will happen, but it's just a question of time. Another example. In the first sentence, the speaker isn't sure if the situation will happen. Maybe the speaker won't have time. But in the second situation, it's not a question of if they have time, but when they will have time. So it's a question of time, not if. So again, the zero or first conditional. Sometimes it might be possible to use both, but there is a difference in meaning. Compare these sentences. The first sentence here is a general fact, and you is probably talking about people in general. The second sentence is I'm talking a specific situation and talking to you personally. If you do this, that will happen. So it's more specific. It's a first conditional. This other example, in addition to the point above where the first example, if you heat ice it melts, is general, it's also very typical to use a zero conditional there, because why do I need to talk about you personally? This is a general fact that everybody knows. So if you heat ice it will melt. Really? You surprise me. So people would not expect a first conditional sentence for such an obvious situation. Okay, so what about the first and second conditional sentences? Both can be grammatically correct, but it depends on the speaker's opinion. Is the result likely or is it imaginary? But sometimes only one option is actually logical. Compare these sentences. If Bursaspor win the league, I'll be happy. The speaker thinks it's likely. Maybe the speaker is a big fan of Bursaspor and thinks that great things will happen. But also it could be grammatically correct. If Bursaspor won the league again, I'd be happy. The speaker thinks it isn't a likely result, or it's less likely. Also these examples. If I see an alien, I'll take a photograph. Grammatically, it's correct, but it isn't a normal situation, so this is illogical. If you say that, if I see an alien, I'll take a photograph, maybe people will think you're a little bit crazy, although it is possible. It's more logical to say, if I saw an alien, I'd take a photograph. So in this situation, although both are grammatically correct, there is only one true right answer, and that is the second conditional, because most people would agree that it is an unlikely, or at best, an imaginary situation. Another difference between the first and the second conditional is that the second conditional can sound less direct. It sounds more polite, in the same way that I would like sounds more polite than I want. Compare these sentences. Well, Dad, if you drive me to school, I won't be too tired for my lessons. That sounds direct, a little bit impolite and disrespectful to the father. Well, Dad, if you drove me to school, I wouldn't be too tired for my lessons. More polite, less aggressive. Or thinking about negotiations in business. If you give me a 50% discount, I'll buy 100 items. It's direct, it's forceful. Doesn't really give the other person the opportunity to discuss or negotiate the situation. Use the second conditional, if you gave me a 50% discount, I'd buy 100 items. It's softer, it's looking for room to make a discussion and an agreement. So it's more polite. So what about unless? We can use unless with 0 first and second conditionals. But the difference. Unless means if not or except in this situation. So looking at this example, you'll get wet unless you take an umbrella. You'll get wet if you don't take an umbrella. So it's the if is the opposite way around to unless. You'll get wet if you take an umbrella? That's illogical. So you'll get wet unless you take it. You'll get wet if you don't. If means on condition that. I'll get fit if I exercise. I won't get fit unless I exercise. So again, it's the opposite way around. Notice how the verbs are changing from positive to negative. A quick practice using if or unless. You won't be able to describe the picture if you look at it. Does that make sense? No. You won't be able to describe the picture unless you look at it carefully. If you don't mind, I'll sit here. Remember, if you don't mind. If you don't mind, if it's not a problem for you. Unless or if she does well in the interview, she won't be accepted. Unless she does well, she won't be accepted. If she doesn't do well, she won't be accepted. So see again how if would work the opposite to unless. I'll go to the concert with you tonight unless my boss asks me to work overtime. I won't go to the concert if my boss asks me to work overtime. Again, the opposite way round. Pause the video now and try the last few sentences. Okay, there are the answers to the last 6 sentences. So to review the first, second and third conditional, pause the video and copy out this table. Go back at the earlier slides and think about the structures you should use with each conditional. Then add your own example. Make it personal. A sentence that is about you or your life, you can remember it far better than if you have a sentence that I give you. So please, pause the video now and complete the table. So an example for the zero conditional. If you generally lie in the sun too long, you burn. This is an unspecific situation, it's a general fact. First conditional, again present tense, but it has a future idea, uses will or be going to, or modals such as have to, might, should or can. If I eat another 5 knefe tonight, I'll be ill. As you can imagine, eating 6 or more knefe in one evening, although very nice, will give you a bad stomach. Second conditional, so now it's looking at if and the past tense, using would and the basic form of the verb. If I were rich, I would give money to charity. It is true in English you will hear even natives say if I was rich. It's very common in English to say if I was rich, if he was rich. But the correct grammar is actually if I were. For the third conditionals, if plus past perfect, using would have and the past participle. If I hadn't left the concert early, I would have met the band. Or, as you'll see in later studies, I could have met the band. The opportunity would have been there. I might have met the band. They were there, I was there, so I might have met them. There are alternatives to using would have all the time with the third conditional. So the first practice activity. Take a look at these sentences and decide which conditional has been used. Remember to think about the function of each sentence. Is it real? Is it imaginary? Is it the present, the future, or the past? Is it a general fact? Pause the video now and try to find the answers. The answers are now on screen for you. A second practice activity, again a typical example of a conditional activity, is to put the verb in brackets with the correct form. Remember to add auxiliary verbs such as will, had, would, etc., and negatives where necessary to make the sentences logical. Pause the video and try the activity. The answers are now on screen for you. For further practice, you can study activities 1 on page 176, exercises A and B in your pack. There's also some different sites with the British Council or Learn English Teens at the British Council, and of course many other sites that you can use. A further writing or speaking practice you can do: create 5 sentences to warn your friend about a bad situation. These are specific events, so they would be in the first conditional. And then create 5 what-if questions about unusual or imaginary situations. These are hypothetical, present or future ideas, so it's the second conditional. Then also write the answers for these questions. And then for further practice, 5 questions to ask someone you know about their past. Ask them what would have happened if, so use the third conditional. Then interview that person so you can write their answers. For example, what would have happened if you hadn't moved to Eskişehir? Ahmet would have stayed in Ankara if he hadn't moved to Eskişehir. What would you have done if your wife hadn't married you? Ali would have stayed single if his wife hadn't married him. Again, put those sentences into language that you can connect to. Make it more personal, and you will remember it more easily. Remember, you can also ask your course teachers any questions you may have on the Edmodo platform. Good luck with your future studies.